So the new expansion Lions of Casterly Rock came out for the Game of Thrones living card game. So let's take a look at this and see how the art renditions compare to how the descriptions are in the books. First up is the box itself, and we have Tywin overlooking the Lannister army, most likely preparing to ride out against Robb Stark and the Northern Host from the first book. I love how the detail on the camps and the Lion of Lannister on the back of Tywin's cloak sort of pop out. Even the body language that Tywin has is sort of a commanding presence and intones that he's in control. I also like the small details you can see into his personal pavilion on the side there. It looks like a table with some candles, maybe where he was reviewing a map or making plans. And also the smoke rising from the camps of the cooking fires is a nice touch as well. In the book, Tywin is described as a tall, slender, broad-shouldered man in his 50s, kept his head shaved ever since he started going bald, but grows out bushy golden side whiskers and has green eyes, fleckled with gold. In battle he wears deep crimson armor, highlighted with gold and with cloth of gold cape. So, aside from the mutton chops being gray, I really can't find any other faults with this one. I'm gonna have to give it 9 out of 10. Next up is Cersei Lannister. Here we see her sitting on a throne, which, judging from the sharp swords to the right-hand side, looks like it's probably the throne next to the Iron Throne. They seem to have gotten her right, although if this is the throne room and court is in session, I'm kind of surprised that she doesn't have more jewelry on. I don't even see a ring on any of her fingers, and while she does have a necklace and some sort of circlet, I think she should have some sort of crown. The description of the book has Cersei as a strikingly beautiful woman with golden hair, emerald green eyes, fair skin, and slender, graceful figure. And the defiant look on her face certainly does seem like she's doing her best Tywin impression, which actually is kind of how she sees herself. So credit to the artist there. But I don't know, I guess I just expected something more like regal and queenly for this. So I'm going to give it only 6 out of 10. Next up is Tyrion. And right off the bat, Tyrion definitely looks kind of weird. But that's actually how he's supposed to look in the books, as opposed to the TV show. Tyrion isn't supposed to be handsome or even normal looking like he is on the HBO series. So that's actually a little bit more accurate. So credit to the artist on that. Now in this picture he appears to be wearing some kind of armor. If there is a theme that this is supposed to be out about the time that they're going out to fight Robb Stark's Northern Host, then that would sort of make sense. Tyrion doesn't look too comfortable, and I really have no idea what that actual item is in front of him. But generally the description from the books is that Tyrion's a dwarf with stubby legs, a jutting forehead, mismatched eyes of green and black, and a mixture of pale blonde and black hair. And just about in every aspect of this, I really do like the picture for its accuracy. While at points in the story Tyrion does don armor, I never really kind of associate Tyrion with fighting. I generally tend to think of Tyrion as being a little bit more studious, so surrounded by books and conversation and the verbal barbs that he gets in all too frequently throughout the series. That being said, this is still a really good rendition of Tyrion, prepping for battle, so a little bit out of his element. I'm going to give this 8 out of 10. This is a really good picture of him. Next up is actually Kevan Lannister, more of a minor character. I gotta say, my first impression isn't all that good. This guy just doesn't look at what I pictured in my head as Kevan looking like. I'm also not sure what point of the story this is supposed to be. It's obviously some dinner, maybe Tyrion's wedding. Kevan appears to be upset, and nobody at the dinner seems to be having a good time. There's also nothing on Kevan indicating that he's a Lannister. No sigil or banners behind him in the background, or even, a Lannister house guard with a lion on the shield somewhere. The books describe him as having a thick-waist man of about 55 years of age, green eyes, rounded shoulders, and fair skin. He's portly, balding, with short blonde hair. He has a close-cropped yellow beard that follows the line of his jaw. Now, the body type's correct here, and as is the short blonde hair, although I don't think it's really so close to a buzz cut as he seems to be pictured here. It took me a minute or two when I first was looking at this, but I do see the faint tracings of a beard around his mouth and jawline, so that's actually pretty accurate. I think the setting maybe, at first glance, makes it kind of difficult to see. So I'm actually going to give this 7 out of 10. I like it better once I knew what to look for, but it still seems off to me. I still think there should be some sort of, sigil on his clothing or something that indicates that he's a Lannister. Next we have Timett, son of Timett. So Timett's supposed to be missing an eye from where he burned it out of his socket with a hot knife as part of his, ritual into manhood. And I really don't see it. I do see he's kind of squinting, and his left eye is supposed to be the one that's burned out, and it does look like there's something wrong with it, like a scar on his face, but that just doesn't look like it's a burn. He's described as being, in the book, as tall, fierce young man with a burned left eye, not even 20 years of age. And this guy could just be some shitty cook who's trying not to sneeze or cry from cutting onions. He just doesn't strike me as a mountain clansman or a vicious brute, so I gotta give this 4 out of 10. This is just not a good depiction of Timett. Next... Oh, here we go. Jaime Lannister. He's got the look of confidence, borderline arrogance going for him. The armor looks great, as does the white cloak on the Kingsguard. Actually, my only complaint in this whole picture is that his right hand resting upon his sword looks a little funky, but aside from that, this is some top-quality artwork. Jaime's a tall, handsome man with curled hair the color of beaten gold. In the book, he has a flashing cat green eyes, smile that cuts like a knife, and Jon Snow even thinks that Jaime is what a king should look like, and Bran even feels that Jaime's what some of the knights look like straight out of the stories. And I have to say, Jaime in this picture absolutely does look kind of like that. While he isn't smiling, it definitely looks like what you would think of in the mythical fables as, the knight in shining armor should look like. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. Only 1 point deducted for that funky-looking kind of hand on the sword, but this is a real good depiction of Jaime Lannister. I like this a lot. Next we have Chella, daughter of CHEYK, and in the book she's the chieftain of the Blackears tribe. Yeah, she definitely strikes me as much more of a mountain clansman than Timett does. I also really like the nice touch of the severed ears that she's holding up on display, so that's really cool that they made that reference back to her tribe. The book describes her as being small, a dark woman, with flat like a boy and not very pretty. So they missed the body type, and adding one scar to her face really didn't do it, but it isn't all that bad. It's just a little inaccurate. I think this is a case of women in fantasy being made more beautiful than the author actually depicted them in the story narrative. The necklace of ears is really cool, but book Chella has claimed something like 40 some odd ears, and not just 3. So while it's really nice, it's not completely accurate, but it does, for the purposes of putting this on a playing card, work out really well. So maybe there was a little bit of a compromise, because if you throw 40 ears on there, it's just going to look a little cluttered, and you might not be able to see what they are exactly. But the 3 ears definitely makes that clean. I was going to give this just 5 out of 10, but I'm going to give it 6 out of 10, considering that this is artwork that was going to be put on a playing card and not necessarily, for a book or for a page layout. Up next, we have Sir Gregor's Marauders, and we got a couple of knights riding down what appears to be peasants. It's not bad, and we actually never do get this scene in the books. I'm guessing this is when Sir Gregor was sent into the Riverlands to sack and raid the townsfolk by Tywin. This isn't an actual scene that plays out on page in the books, so there really isn't a lot to compare. But it is good artwork, and the 3 dogs on House Clegane are clearly visible, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. What do we got next? SHAGGA, son of DOLF. SHAGGA looks pretty badass here. I like this. I like how they gave him dreadlocks, as the mountain clans wouldn't be big on barbershops and grooming, so that's actually kind of a really clever addition, and kind of insightful actually on the artist's point. The book describes him as a large, hairy man. SHAGGA has a deep, deadly voice and prefers to fight with a weapon in each hand. Tyrion says to Tywin that SHAGGA, son of DOLF, is the one who looks like Casterly Rock with hair. While they depicted him fighting a member of, looks like House Karkstark that you can see for the sun symbol on the back, I really can't tell if he's the sort of brute depicted in the books. While the beard's unkempt, this could just have easily been a rejected version of Yoren from the Night's Watch. I think a better picture would have been of him feeding someone's manhood to a goat like he's always threatening to do to people. But it's nice, but when you kind of, break it down, it kind of drops in quality. So sorry, SHAGGA, you're going to get 6 out of 10 on this. Next up is TAENA MERRYWEATHER, and if you don't recall who she is, here's a quick reminder. She's one of the people who testified against Tyrion at his trial. She said she witnessed him dropping something into Joffrey's drink. She also tells Cersei that her maid, Senelle, is a spy for Margaery Tyrell. Later on, she ends up being Cersei's lover and confidant, and then when Cersei gets arrested by the Faith Militant, she flees with her husband back to their keep, which is good because TAENA knows a lot of Cersei's dark little secrets. So with all that in mind, I'm actually pretty impressed with this picture, as it really hits close to what I pictured her as. I like how they didn't make her just a brunette version of another character and gave her a more curvy body type. I also like the look on her face, as it projects intrigue, and she could be overhearing secrets or plotting something herself as well. In the book, she's described as being beautiful and a shapely woman with black hair and large dark eyes. So, well done, artists. I'm going to give this one a perfect 10. It really captures who TAENA is supposed to be. On a side note, I fully expect her in the story to show back up in the books and cause some major issues for Cersei as she betrays her and uses... moving on to the Moon Brothers. This is another mountain clan that Tyrion recruits with promises of weapons from the Vale of Arryn. I like how they're pillaging and raiding here, but I don't think the mountain clans ride horses. So 6 out of 10 until I can be certain. If you know the answer to this, please let me know in the comment section below, but I'm pretty certain that the mountain clansmen aren't mounted on horses. I'm pretty sure they're just hunters and gatherers, and that they're living on foot. Next is the Red Keep Spy. And as this is a Lannister-themed expansion, I'm guessing this is supposed to be one of Cersei's informants. It is a nice picture, with my only real complaint is that it's angled oddly on the card. But again, this isn't supposed to be someone in the books, so there is really no source material to compare it to. 6 out of 10 by default, just for the artwork. And up next, holy shit, ALERIE got a card. This woman works in her mother's brothel, and Tyrion uses her as a cover when he wants to go and visit Shae when he's acting as Hand of the King. She hangs out in the room while Tyrion uses a secret passage to sneak out of the brothel and travel through the streets to where Shae's staying. Cersei ends up snatching her and has her whipped, eventually thinking ALERIE is Shae and the one that Tyrion's interested in, and so she tries to use her as leverage against Tyrion. Books describe her as being beautiful young Islander who speaks the common tongue with only a slight accent. She's taller than Shae, but not as tall as her own mother. And I think they did a great job with her. I gotta say, they really got it right. We can't really tell if this is before or after she gets whipped, as we can't see from the scars on her back, but all things considered, it looks really good. I gotta go with 10 out of 10, so well done. Next up, oh god, Lancel Lannister. Lancel's described as a young, strong, handsome, blonde-haired youth, and he's said to closely resemble his cousin, Jaime. He has green eyes and sandy hair. Lancel's humorless, self-assured, arrogant, and impatient. So I like the large Lannister house banner in the background. Actually, where was this for the Kevan Lannister card? That's what should have been there. But as far as Lancel himself goes, I don't know. I don't think he looks too much like Jaime from the earlier picture. But that being said, the colors are alright, but the expression on his face seems to be one of either disinterest or confusion. Like he's keeping his mouth shut out of fear of saying something stupid. That being said, the picture just, doesn't fit well with what I imagined Lancel looking like. 5 out of 10. Sorry, but Lancel, unlike the Red Keep Spy, where not knowing who they were kind of worked out for their advantage, but knowing who Lancel is and what he's supposed to look like, this just kind of works against him. Up next is, Tommen Baratheon. Okay, I love that they have Tommen playing with his cats in this picture. It is so right, and so much wind going on in this picture that it's almost absolutely perfect. As a side note, I also like the details in the picture in the background. And Tommen in the book is described as being plump with blonde, white hair. At the beginning of A Song of Ice and Fire, he's about 7 years old, and that's right about where Tommen seems to be here. Unlike Joffrey, he's regarded as a good-hearted lad who always tries his best. But I gotta say, this is a pretty spot on as far as the description goes. Plump? Check. Blondish white hair? Check. And even has the 3 cats that were given to him by Marjorie Tyrell. One would be Sir Pounce, Lady Whiskers, and Boots. All 3 are black, and they're all attempting to get that little furry mouse toy. And actually, that toy was actually made for Tommen by one of the house servants, Dorcas. That's actually perfect. I gotta give this 10 out of 10. This is actually the best depiction I've ever seen of Tommen. And the artist even included his 3 cats, which this is just a fantastic depiction of Tommen. Way to go. Next is the Lannisport Guard. Again, there's nothing really to compare here. Just kind of like with the Red Keep Spy. It's not really depicting anyone specific or a set scene from the books. It's decent artwork. I like the sigils on the shield, and that's about it. So 6 out of 10. Up next is the Golden Tooth. And this is another place that gets mentioned frequently, but no chapters actually occur on page at this location. We hear about events that go on there, and it gets referenced by other characters discussing strategy. But so it's kind of difficult to assess the accuracy of this. Essentially, it's a fortress that guards the pass through the mountains from the Riverlands into the Westerlands. And it's the seat of House Lefford, and the sigil of that house is a blue field with a triangle at the bottom that sort of resembles a pyramid, and in the upper right or upper left there should be a yellow sun. And if you look really, really closely, you can see that the artist actually did include the house sigil on those flags that are flying above. So awesome attention to detail here. Aside from that, there really just isn't much to go on. It's clearly in the mountains and could very well be in a spot that is a pass, but you really just can't tell too much all of that because you don't really have an on-page character account. But I'm still going to give this 7 out of 10. I really like that the artist took the time to make sure who was actually seated there as their seat of power. So well done with including their sigil and the flying banners overhead. Next we have Mountains of the Moon, and this is kind of odd since these mountains are located in the Vale of Arryn instead of the Westerlands. So I didn't actually expect to see this since it's a Lannister-themed expansion, but I guess if they're including the mountain clans who have become Lannister allies, then it kind of makes sense. In the books, they're described as having snow-capped gray-green peaks. Rock slides are common, and its foothills are rocky, high and windy, and the high road from the inn at the crossroads passes through the mountains. So, I see some snow-capped peaks in the background, but not so much green aspects. Gray and green kind of suggests to me that some of them should have some sort of pine trees at the top with, granite stone being the main type of stone that comprises the bald areas of the mountains. And this picture doesn't appear to be of the high road and could just be another pass within the mountains, but still, I think there should be, some sort of trees somewhere. It's a nice depiction, but I'm only going to give it 6 out of 10. Okay, so last of the Lannister location cards is LANNISPORT Treasury. And wow, it doesn't exactly look like Fort Knox, does it? For such a large and cavernous cathedral-style ceilings, there doesn't seem to be a ton of treasure. I always kind of pictured something along the lines of, the hoard that the dragon Smaug had from the old 70s Rankin and Bass animated version of The Hobbit. Just, big giant piles of gold. And it's nice art, but I think it's just way too off. Lannisters are supposed to be filthy, disgusting Scrooge McDuck level of obscene wealth and richness. And I feel if Tywin walked into this vault, he would freak the hell out thinking they had been robbed blind. So I'm going to knock this down to, this Lancel is even going to do better than this one. I'm going to give this 4 out of 10. Next card is the Shield of Lannisport. And we also get a nice pic of Tywin looking over some letter or other. I hope it's not the accounting ledger for the money in the LANNISPORT treasury, although that would explain why he doesn't look too happy. But on a side note, the eyes kind of look like they follow you around the room, kind of like George Washington's eyes on the $1 bill. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. It actually is a really good picture of Tywin, and I like the embroidered lions on his shirt. Next we have the Valyrian steel dagger. This could be the one that the Catspaw attempted to use when he tried to off-brand. I like the runes and the detail on the blade itself. The hilt should be some form of dragon bone, and it's sort of difficult to tell exactly what the hilt is made out of, but it still looks really nice. So I'll go with 7 out of 10. It's a cool-looking weapon. Next card. A Lannister always pays his debts. I love this picture. This is Tyrion walking out of the Vale after his trial by combat has won, and he's tossing the Gaoler Mord his promised bag of gold. And in the background, you can even see Lysa and Sweet Robin sitting upon the weirwood throne of the Eyrie. They even got the scar on Mord correct, so I'm going full 10 for 10 on this one. Show watchers might notice the moon door is missing from the floor behind Tyrion, but in the books, that's because the moon door is actually located on one of the walls and not the floor. I can't tell if that's supposed to be Cat in the background on the dais next to the throne, but ultimately, this is a great picture, and it's perfect for the title of the card. Next we have Insidious Scheme. This seems to be the scene in the Godswood at King's Landing, where Ned warns Cersei that he's going to tell Robert of his findings, and Cersei attempts to seduce Ned, who turns her down. It's a great depiction of the two, and I think it captures the tones of the scene really, really well. You can practically hear Cersei saying with that look, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. My one knock on this is that Ned should be injured in this picture. He hadn't recovered fully from his shattered leg that he suffered when his horse fell on him, so he should either be sitting down or have some sort of cane or crutch. But all in all, it's a great depiction of this scene, so easily 9 out of 10. Next we have Daring Rescue. Okay, this is a really cool scene in this series. This takes place in Harrenhal, where Jaime comes back to save Brienne. Once he gets back to Harrenhal, he finds out that they've sort of tossed her in a pit with a bear, and she's in a dress attempting to defend herself with a wooden sword. Jaime jumps down into the pit, and this forces the onlookers to fire bolts at the bear and kill it, as they all fear Tyrion's wrath should the bear end up killing Jaime. I like how Brienne looks in the distance. Also that Jaime is missing his hand, and his stump appears to have been bandaged up by Qyburn, so that's all really good. I'm going to go with 9 out of 10. The only thing I can't really see here is that bear is like riddled with bolts and arrows. I don't see anybody in the crowd up there, you know, holding onto a crossbow, but it's a really good picture. I like it a lot. Next we have Edric's Storm. And Edric's really, really important to the story, because he's kind of like living proof Joffrey and Tommen and Myrcella are born of incest instead of being Robert's true children. But here's how he's described in the books. Edric is a sturdy, attractive youth with jet black hair and deep blue eyes. He is said to be the very image of his father, although he also has large ears common to House Florent. He is charming and courteous, but also fierce and proud. In his manner, Davos Seaworth compares him to Robert and Renly Baratheon. Unfortunately, in this picture, we really can't tell because the hood is covering up his hair and casting shadows over his face. So his eyes are hard to make out, and additionally we really can't see his ears either. The look appears to be somewhat fearful, which doesn't seem to go along with what we know of him in the books. Who knows, maybe someone just told him that Melisandre wants to sacrifice him to the Red God, but I don't think that's right. Edric, I don't think, is portrayed all that well here. 4 out of 10. I mean, this could be any kid in the series, and if you're going to portray Edric, you might as well make him that young-looking Robert Baratheon. Okay, and next we have Disputed Claim. Actually, I think this is the letter that Ned writes to Stannis, asking him to come to King's Landing and take the throne. I like it, but we don't have too much to go over here, so I'm just going to give it 6 out of 10. Okay, now we got Victarion Greyjoy. He's dressed in full plate mail, with what appears to be riggings in the background, and additionally he's got that wicked-looking axe just slung over his shoulder there, so... his description is that he's a large and powerful man, a bull's broad chest and a boy's flat stomach. His hair is fleckled with gray. He wears plate armor in combat, a helm in the shape of a kraken, and wields a cruel axe. So there are some streaks of gray in his hair, so that seems to be accurate. And the helm, you can make out the image of a kraken, which is really subtly done, and I think it can be missed upon first glance rather easily. I think that might be due to the fact that when we look at other helms like Robert's Antler Helm and Sandor's Hound's Helm, and also the awesome Bull's Helm that Gendry has, they're just so much more distinct, and this Kraken Helm was just so subtle by comparison. But then again, it's probably a lot less awkward in battle and may actually, protect him better. So I actually like the subtle tone on that. The axe definitely looks like the last thing you ever want to get hit with, so full compliments to the artist on this one. Although I always pictured Victarion with a trimmed black beard, but then again, maybe I'm just confusing him with Euron, who does actually have the beard. Regardless, I really like this pick, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. Next we have Old Wick. So this is Naga's Hill, where the Kingsmoot ends up being held. And it's also the location where the Grey King supposedly slew the sea dragon, the Naga, upon its shore. I like it, but I've seen better pictures of Naga's Hill, so I'm only going to go 7 out of 10. The Martell-themed cards, and first we have Trystane Martell, and it looks like he's playing Savas, and Trystane's described in the books as having straight black hair, olive skin, which they seem to have gotten right. I like the addition of the Savas game here, though. In Feast for Crows, he and Myrcella play this quite often, so I'm going to give this 7 out of 10. I like it. Let's see. Oh, and the next Martell card is You Murdered Her Children. This is a pretty good bit of art. Initially, I didn't like this, as I thought the broken spear should be a little bit closer to the center of the chest of Sir Gregor, but actually having it go through the upper torso and the shoulder, pinning him to the ground, is a nice touch that's kind of grown on me as I've looked it over a little bit more. Also, if you look at the Viper, he looks like he's about to get the confession he wants. Even better, if you look at the positioning of Gregor's left hand, he's about to turn the tables on Oberon. So I really do actually like this the more I looked it over. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10, which is a lot higher than my first initial impression, which probably would have been about 5. The only real complaint that I have on this is that it looks like it's taking place on a battlefield, and this was a trial by combat, and the background should have been, members of court watching instead of just, random silhouettes of soldiers. Let's move on to the Night's Watch cards. First up, we've got Sweet Donnel Hill. And my first thought when I saw this card was, who the hell is Donnel Hill? I actually had to do a quick look and found that he's actually been all over the place in the story. Turns out he's one of those minor characters who he's involved in a lot more than you realize. He was one of the conspirators with Chet, who was supposed to cut the tethers of the horses, but that fell through when the Great Ranging was attacked by the others. Donnel made it to Craster's Keep, and then eventually back to Castle Black. When a glamoured rattleshirt was getting offered to the flames, Donnel actually is one of the guys who shoots him with arrows to give him a quick death. Books describe him as he has white teeth, fat red lips, yellow hair, worn in a tumble down to his shoulders. He's slender and makes easy japes. And, aside from not being able to tell the length of his hair, I gotta say, the artist did really well on this one. So 7 out of 10. Looks good. Next is the Bridge of Skulls location card. This is another location that doesn't actually appear on page in the books, but it gets mentioned a couple of times. Bridge, as depicted, spans a gorge which has water below. Bowen Marsh and other members of the Watch actually end up defending this bridge against the Weeper and some of the other wildlings. All that stuff happens off page, and you hear about it, after the fact. So I'm just going to give it 6 out of 10. This could be just any random bridge anywhere. Jeyne Westerling. Jeyne in the books is described as being a shy, pretty girl. She's a slender of posture, and she has chestnut curls and a heart-shaped face with brown eyes. And the girl here does look slender and pretty. Her body language does suggest a bit of shyness, although it could also be disinterest, or tedium, or boredom. The chestnut color hair is right, although we really can't tell if it's curly as she has it done up. She's mounted on a horse, and I'm not sure whom she's supposed to be looking at beyond. Maybe that's Robb with his back turned, riding off to battle, or maybe riding off to the Red Wedding. From this profile, we really can't tell the shape of her face either, so, I don't know, 7 out of 10? It's okay, but not great. It doesn't hit all the hallmarks that Jeyne probably should have. Let's see. Next is the Last Hearth Scouts. Now, the Last Hearth is the northernmost keep in the Seven Kingdoms, held by House Umber, and again, they don't really play a role in the story as of yet, and we don't really have anyone, going there on page, so there's nothing to compare to. I'm just going to go 6 out of 10. It just doesn't seem all that right. Okay, let's move to the Targaryen theme cards. And first one is Sir Barristan Selmy, and I gotta say, I'm not a fan of this. He has the Kingsguard armor and the white cloak, which Daenerys actually did give to him after he stopped pretending to be Ariston Whitebeard, but that's one of the things that is missing here. Where's Barristan's beard? Barristan's old, and yeah, this guy definitely looks old, and he definitely looks fit for his age, but he should still have that sort of trademark beard. I mean, I really just can't hate this pick enough. I mean, I think this may be the worst card in the entire set so far, so 3 out of 10. Next is Daenerys' favor, and judging from the location, it seems to be when Daenerys is in Meereen. She has a crown on, and she's ruling. I'm not sure who the person kneeling is supposed to be. It's clearly not Quentyn Martell. Maybe Barristan before he gets his new armor. I'm not really sure. So it's kind of hard to tell what this scene is supposed to be. I'm going to just give it a 6 out of 10. Next up is ALERIE Tyrell, and just as with Donnel Hill, I had to figure out who the hell she was again. So she's actually the spouse of Mace Tyrell, the mother of Sir Loras, Willem, the heir to Highgarden, Garland the Gallant, and Marjorie Tyrell. So she's actually extremely important. In the book, she's described as dignified, tall, and handsome, long silver hair, and younger than her husband. She ends up arriving in King's Landing, and she attends the Purple Wedding and leaves just after Tywin's funeral. She's kind of a minor character that's sort of heavily related to a bunch of the major characters in regards to House Tyrell. It looks like what little we know of her they got correct, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. Okay, next is A Rose of Gold, which is actually a song sung by Hamish the Harper at the Purple Wedding. There's nothing really special. I mean, it's not like you can compare this to anything, so just 6 out of 10. Okay, now we'll move on to the cards that don't have any specific house affiliation. First up is the High Septon, and this is the fat one. And he's got that crown, which gets sold off later on by the High Sparrow, and this is the guy I believe gets torn apart by the angry mob. And he's described as being a squat and ponderously fat with graying hair, considered corrupt, gluttonous, pompous, and long-winded. And Jamie thinks he's a fat fraud, actually. And I gotta give credit to the artist. He definitely got the fat fraud aspect that Jamie Lannister sees in the picture. Corrupt and gluttonous could easily come across. You can almost hear him selling, spiritual snake oil to the masses in this picture. I'm tempted to give it a 7 out of 10, but I think that's a little low, just because I personally don't like this High Septon in the books. So I'm gonna be generous, and I'm gonna go all the way up to 9 out of 10 with this. Maybe just an 8. He is still kind of a jerk. The next is the Devout Freerider. Nothing too special, and again, not a character that really appears on the page, but it's nice artwork, so I'll just give it a 7. We now have the Wildling Bandit, and again, this is another card that's more for game purposes and doesn't have anything directly to be compared to in the books. It's actually kind of too bad that they didn't think to make this guy one of the minor characters who gets killed when Osha shows up and they catch Bran alone in the Wolf's Wood. That actually would have been kind of neat. Yeah, I'll just give this, 6 out of 10. Next is the Ocean Road, and this is the road that goes from Lannisport down through the Westerlands into Highgarden and the Reach. So it's kind of like the Westerosi version of Sunset Strip. I like the colors and the boat in the distance as well, so I'll give this a 7 out of 10. It looks really nice. Next is Appointed, and that appears to be Sir Kevan as Hand of the King. Now, I actually like this picture of Kevan. It looks a lot better than the actual picture of Kevan on his own card. So yeah, this looks really good. I'm going to give this, I'm going to go 8 out of 10. I was going to initially give it 7, but I'll give it 8. Next up is Council Chambers, and I like that they got the statues of the Valyrian Sphinxes in the back. It's also a really good depiction of Grand Maester Pycelle. That's really along the lines of exactly what I think he looks like in my head when I read the books. So I'll give this an 8 out of 10. Let's see here. Next is the Reigns of Castamere. Again, this is another song, so there's nothing really to compare it to. I'll give this a 6, just solely on the basis of the style of the art. And now we come to the plot cards. And first is the Lions of the Rock. Not bad art. We have some Lannister soldiers standing around in what appears to be a good-sized city in the background. My only complaints is that we really can't tell if that's supposed to be Casterly Rock in the background. Also, these are just house guards. I mean, if the card is Lions of the Rock, shouldn't it be something like a Lannister family portrait? Not bad, but at the same time, not all that great. And I think they could have done something a little bit better. So I'm just going to give this a 6 out of 10. Next is the Unexpected Delay. And we have a field army that seems to be breaking camp, but they don't seem to be in any hurry. There's one guy who seems to be prepping a horse, and another guy seems to be walking back into his tent. This wasn't really all that impressive until I recognized the sigil on the shields is the sigil of the twins of House Frey. So that makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. You don't get the nickname the Late Walder Frey for nothing, so this really works well. Next up is Summoned to Court, a city guard just hammering a notice upon a door. Again, this card doesn't really depict a scene from the books, so nothing to really compare it to. So 6 out of 10. Next is Littlefinger's Meddling, and I actually like this depiction of Littlefinger. He's got the goatee and the hints of gray hairs on the sides. You can also see his mockingbird brooch holding his cloak. This is pretty spot on to what I always pictured Littlefinger to look like, although he seems to be lurking and slinking in the shadows. And while he does a little bit of that, I kind of picture that's something more along the lines that Varys would do. Littlefinger's more like a corrupt accountant, nefarious business person, so slunking around the shadows just doesn't seem to be too much of a Littlefinger thing to do. It is still a really good depiction of him, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. And let's see. Okay, we have Gossip and Lies next. And this looks like it's Tyrion and Shae in bed, and well, Shae looks pretty happy. Tyrion looks severely troubled, so maybe this is the time when Tyrion was the acting Hand of the King, and Shae was hidden in the city and he was sneaking around trying to see her. Tyrion looks a bit off from the prior pictures we saw him in. I'm only going to give this a 6 out of 10. It's not really all that great. Next up is Time of Plenty, and again, this is another one that we don't have any in-book reference for. Again, it could be something that the game designers just needed for playing purposes, but regardless, it isn't bad. I mean, I suspect this might be in Highgarden someplace, or perhaps some lands held by the Fossaways. Not a lot that really links this to A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones. 6 out of 10. I mean, if this was hanging up in somebody's office, I would have absolutely no idea that it was based on a fantasy novel or something related to it, so there we go. And the last card is Early Frost. And we've got a White Raven calling in what looks like to be a cornfield, where things are looking somewhat bleak, actually. White Ravens get sent out by the Maesters at the Citadel to herald the end of summer and the beginning of winter, so this does have some ominous overtones, which I like. I like this card, actually, a lot, and I'm sure if any of you listeners listen to Vassals of Kingsgrave podcast, Brett on that would probably like it as well, so I like the overtones on this. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. That's it for the Lions of Rock expansion. I'll do some more artwork reviews later on in the expansions, the core set as well as some of the other chapter packs, and the other expansion set, the Wolves of Winter. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Cheers, and thanks for watching.